This is a short tutorial on how to set up your class if you are starting with a blank shell. If you're given a blank shell and you want to create the course and set up your gradebook, you'll start by adding the gradable items to the appropriate week or module. Perhaps you'll go to week 1 and you'll want to include an essay or an assignment. Simply choose assignment, title it. You'd include the instructions here, a due date. Grading should be set for 100 points. You can add a rubric. You can add additional submission details and grading options, and of course display of grades, and that should be set the primary as score. Submit, and then you will continue adding the different assessments to each week as appropriate. You can add discussions, essays, quizzes, tests, blogs, wikis, any assessment that you want, you simply place in the week, and then when you go to the full grade center, those columns will populate with your gradable items.
And you will see that there will already be some columns populated in your grade center. In Blackboard, assignments, tests, discussions, blogs, journals will automatically generate a column in the grade center. You can also create a column that's not automatically attached to an activity and add the grade manually. You can do this by creating column. You'll name the column name. You can use a different or slightly shorter version of the column name for the grade center name. That's what will appear at the top of the column, and that can be useful. And then you want the primary display to be score. And if you have a category, you can show it here. And if this is going to be something that is added into your final grade, then you have to put the points possible. Usually 100 is used. You also have the options of putting in a due date. And if you're going to calculate this column that you're entering manually into the final calculation, then you need to make sure that you include this column in grade center calculations and then submit. You also have calculated column, which gives you further options in terms of feeding other columns and grades into one. Once you have your grade columns set up, you're ready to manage them. And there's a number of options that you have for managing grade columns. The first is grade periods. You may want to set up your grade periods by the number of weeks that you have in the class. And this is where you would do it. You can simply create, and this one is already set up, but you'll create the periods and save them. And then that will show up when you get to the grade column organization. You can check the grade schema. The grade schema in Kaiser classes are done by letter. And this is where you'll see that 90 to 100 is an A, B, C, D, E, F, and incomplete. Usually 0 to 1% is how we set the incomplete. This is where you may want to check to make sure your schema is correct. The next area that you'll want to consider is grading color codes. Now this can be very helpful if you want to show either grading status in progress, needs grading, exempt, or grading range, and this is very useful. Perhaps you want to have 0 to 64, and you want either the background color or the text to show up in red. This will make it very easy for you to see when a student gets a failing grade. Notice? You can also set up the background color of the boxes, and you can set up your color coding to match the grading schema. You can set up by category if you like, such as assignment, blog, discussion, and it helps to organize. You can use smart views if you like, and that is a way of truncating what you see, so that instead of having all of the grade book, perhaps you want to just look at 1 week or one area. Of course, when you get to final grading, you'll want to make sure that your smart view is repositioned as full grade. This is where you can organize the columns in the order that they'll appear across from left to right. And as you see, the static columns are frozen: last name, first name, user, campus, access. In this setup, we've set the final grade, the external grade, and the weighted total in the front. You may want to show them as the very last columns. And then we've set the rest up, column organization by week. And note, you can move a column. If you wanted to move this, you can change it to maybe a category or a period. Maybe you want to change this to week 1, and that will move the column. This is also an area where you can hide columns. You may not want to show your students the total column. You may not want to show them the pretest. So it's different ways to handle the organizations of the columns themselves. And then there's also an option of row visibility. Perhaps you have a student that is been withdrawn from the class and you don't want to have to see them, so you may hide that row and that student will disappear. A few things that are very important in the grade book. One is the final grade. The final grade has to be set for external grade. Now you notice you don't see it here because it's already set. But if you go to another column, let's say we went to the weighted total, you would have that option set as external grade. So you just want to make sure whatever has that green check mark, that's set as the external grade, and that should be the final grade. You also want to check the weighted total. The weighted total is where you calculate your final grade, and you can do that by going to Edit Column Information. Notice that all of the columns that we've had have been selected as being available for grade calculation. And all the columns that are selected for using grade calculation will appear in this box here. And in order to keep them, and notice the post-test is still here. Total weight, 95%, so we're missing 5%. You would choose that post-test, move it over, add the 5%, and submit. Just a few things to remember before you finalize your grade book. You want to be sure that there's a column for the pre-test and the post-test. If those columns are not there, if you perhaps, if these tests are being handed out in class, you want to create just a regular column for the pre-test and the post-test. And when you do so, you will be sure to enter the following information.
And be sure that the title is pre-test, all one word. You need the primary display set as score. The points possible should be set at 100. And then under options, include this column in Gradebook Center calculations? No, you do not want this included in the Grade Center calculations because the pretest will not count towards the final grade. And then submit.
In the post-test, you'll do the exact same thing, except it will be included in the final grade calculation. So just create a column. You want to title it post-test, one word. score, no secondary display, category, it's a test, and then 100 possible points, and include this column in the grade column center calculations. Finally, just those last checks. Again, remember, only one column can be set as the final or external grade, and that should be the final grade. Also, you may want to check and be sure that in the final grade, unlike the score that all the other columns have, the final grade should be set as a letter in the primary display. And that also should not be included in grade center calculations. A few other useful things to use in the grade center is reports. You can create a report and choose the report name, and you can have all the columns, a column in a certain grade period, or selected columns. Typically, you're going to want to use all the columns so that you can see a student's progression. And then you can either run it with all users, which is going to be a fairly long file, or you can select a user, and then you do that, you'll see a list of students come up, and just select the student and submit, and you'll have your report. If you'd like to add extra credit, you simply create a column and call it extra credit. Keep it as score. You want to add however many points are possible. Now, in the Kaiser system, we're allowed to award up to 2% extra credit. So this might be 2, it might be 0.5 if you had extra credit each week. And then be sure you do not want this as included in the grade center calculations. You'll simply align the extra credit column next to the weighted total, and then manually add them together to get your final grade. Do not include this in the weighted column because it will calculate the weighted total as up to 102% as opposed to 100. So you simply take your weighted column, and you can do this through column organization, and you'll want to place that extra credit column, and you can do so by carrying it up and placing it right alongside the weighted total, and then you'll see in your final grade calculations, you'll see the weighted total with the extra credit alongside it. So add those two together and you'll have your final grade.